Welcome to Leadership Unfiltered, the podcast where real leaders get real about what it takes to succeed in today's fast-paced corporate world. I'm Dr. Dayan Douse, founder and president of P.R.I.D.E Consulting, a human behavior and development company serving as an executive coach and facilitator, working with organizations to deliver practical ways to evolve teams, advance organizations, and transform cultures. I hold a PhD in organization and management with over 2 decades of leadership experience in Fortune 500 companies. And I'm best-selling co-author of the book Nothing But Net. I'm joined by my co-host, Phillip Smith. And Phillip is a seasoned technology executive with extensive experience leading large-scale engineering teams and driving digital transformation. Over his 25 years of leadership experience, he has held multiple roles from supervisor to vice president. His personal brand is coder by blood, architect by trade, and leader by choice. Every episode will deliver real-world strategies, unfiltered advice, and the tools you'll need to take your leadership to the next level. Let's get started.
In today's episode, we are going to cover another one of the 10 Tensions of Leadership by Justin Wright. This one is autonomy and support. Give your team room to solve problems their way and step in when they need you. Trust grows both ways. This is a really good leadership tension. And it kind of highlights, at least for me, the different leadership styles. So I value autonomy. I value it innately, and I struggle when I don't have it. And that shows up in my leadership style because I want to offer it to the folks on my team. And because I value it so much, I default to them valuing it, which can be the case, but can also not be the case. And that can cause me to not necessarily give all the support that I may necessarily need to be giving at any moment in time. I really learned this lesson in a leadership change. And so I have a good buddy, and I know he probably won't mind me sharing the story. His name is Dan, and he and I are yin and yang. I am strategic and futuristic and about the planning and the execution, and he is execution and operations and stability and making sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And he's strategic too, but we're really yin and yang. And so I exited a team and he entered that team. And the folks that valued autonomy from their leader over necessarily having direct support from their leader did very well under me. The folks that needed more support under me, they struggled a bit. And then when Dan came in, it flipped. The folks that needed direct support from their leader did much better under Dan. And the folks that truly valued autonomy struggled. And I don't know if that's Dan's military background showing up some way. I don't know. That may be a little bit of the story that I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting situation because that doesn't happen that often, where a leader change will happen and you get to observe what happens after that leadership change. And I was lucky enough to be able to get some feedback and be able to actually observe how the organization was continuing to operate after my exit. And it was a good learning for me to say, from a reflection perspective, what could I have done differently to ensure that the folks that needed direct leadership support from me got what they needed. And that's one of the things that I've carried forward with me to kind of say, how do I make sure that those folks get honored as well?
Yes.
And I don't necessarily have a complete answer to that yet. But one of the things that I've done moving forward is to be more explicit about it. To say, my default, and make my default explicit. To say, my default leadership is to give you autonomy. My default is to let you figure it out, let you solve the problem. That's my default. But we don't have to operate that way. And I created language around using pulling the andon cord. I said at any point in time, you get to a point where you need my support, you can pull the andon cord.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells me that you need support and I will be there. Now, getting folks to a place where they're comfortable pulling the andon cord is a different conversation.
Yes.
But that has helped in my journey of making sure that the folks that need that support have an avenue which to get it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And before I start, you always give these great, insightful messages with sometimes high context.
Okay.
And so I have to make sure our audience knows
Yes, please.
What you mean by andon cord.
Yes. So an andon cord comes from Deming. It comes from Lean Six Sigma. It comes from Toyota in terms of on a production line, specifically in the auto industry. It's about quality and making sure that if something is happening on the production line that is going to affect the quality of the car or truck, there's an actual physical cord that people could pull that would stop the line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an andon cord. And so if you pulled it, that was the signal that we have a production issue on the line. We need to stop the line, solve it before production can continue. And so taking that metaphor and saying, hey, if you get to a point where you truly need my support as your leader, you can pull that andon cord and stop. You can stop everything. And that tells me that it's time for me to show up to give you support in no other manner other than to support you.
Yes.
And so that is the andon cord.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that. Love that metaphor, by the way, in our topics around leadership, because there are often times that you need to pull the andon cord.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's a topic we can get into because there's some anxiety in pulling the andon
Yes.
cord. There's all kind of things that happen when the andon cord is pulled, and so we should unpack that a little bit. But thank you for sharing that. I know when I think of this topic around autonomy and support, and it being a tension, I struggle with it being a tension. I'm like, why is that a tension when both of those things should be true? I should be able to give my team autonomy and support. But then I read the definition of that, and it is truly about the tension is letting your team solve the problem in their own way. So that is where the tension is.
Yes.
It's not that you don't give your teams autonomy and you don't give them support or you can't do both. It is how are you doing that? And are you allowing the space to let them solve the problem and learn and grow? Because that's what doing it in their own way means. Is they get a chance to experiment and to learn and grow through the process. And if giving them support is telling them what to do, then that is not autonomy. And you are not allowing them to learn and grow in ways that they need to, because leaders often move around. And if you are giving all the answers and they're leaning on you heavily to get through then when you're not there, they're going to have a hard time. And so that's where I really had to think about this topic, because I'm like you, I'm like, well, of course I want to give my teams autonomy and I want to give them support. So I don't have attention. But there have been times when I haven't given them the time or space to solve it in their own way. Because to do that, to give them the true autonomy they need the time to do that.
Yes.
But we also understand that sometimes you're up against time. And so you have to balance the autonomy with delivery. And so that's where the tension comes in as a leader. But you have to be able to do both, I would say, to be a good leader. When I'm coaching leaders, I remind them to make sure they are giving that balance, that they do exactly what you said and be explicit about the type of leader that they want to be, so that team knows what to expect. And because if you're not transparent, what will happen is they will think you don't care.
Yes.
They'll say, well, you're just letting us do whatever, and you're not giving us the support. I mean, if you up front tell your teams that you are leading from a place of autonomy, then they know, oh, okay, so you're giving me the freedom to solve this problem and the time to really work through it. I also coach people on experimentation. So part of this in solving problems in their own way is allowing them to experiment. And experimentation means there's failure in that.
Yes.
And so as a leader, you have to be, if you're going to say you're a leader that gives autonomy, you also have to give them the freedom to make mistakes and then not beat them over the head with the mistake, right? Because this really all boils down to trust. And so if you're going to trust that team with the space to solve the problem their own way and make mistakes, and if you allow it to happen, then they'll trust you. As soon as you go and beat them over the head with it, then they won't trust you. They'll say, you say you are given autonomy, but then you beat us over the head with the mistakes, that's not really autonomy, and it's definitely not support there. So I know there's been examples of teams that I've led and teams that coach leaders where the autonomy and the trust is really there after that team has demonstrated that they have the skills and knowledge to perform in that space. And so I took over a team. And that team had been together for double-digit years, maybe 12 or 14 years before I took them over. What was unique about that team is that entire team had been a team over that span together. There wasn't much movement. They were all together during that whole time in that same space. So they really became the experts in that space. So I just remember sitting down in one of my first meetings with them and trying to say what type of leader I was and, trying to learn more about them. And they were seasoned veterans. And they basically told me, look, we know what we're doing. We just need you to stay out of our way. Give us the support we need, clear the hurdles that we need, the roadblocks that might show up. But in terms of our job, we know what we're doing. And the autonomy for me was really doing that, staying out of their way, giving them that space, clearing the roadblocks and the hurdles. And it was a wonderful experience because they were truly experts in that space. Around that same time, I had a separate team that was off-site. And so I would only go to that site once or twice a week. So I wasn't with that team very long. I didn't spend as much time with that team. And so I still gave them autonomy because they were experts in their space as well, but I leaned more on the support for them. Because I wasn't there with them on a daily basis, I needed to make sure that I understood what hurdles and roadblocks they were running into, that they had all the support they need, even though they had the autonomy. And so just know, if you're gonna be a leader who gives autonomy and support, that trust is really key to this. And the way that you trust is through demonstration. Right? Demonstration as a leader that you're not micromanaging, and demonstration from that team that they can execute and solve problems. And it may be different than the way you would solve it as the leader.
Yeah, I like how you pick up on the difference between, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, between support and presence. Because although I definitely default towards more autonomy, you still have to show up.
Yes.
And so autonomy doesn't mean that you are absent.
Right.
Autonomy is about decision making and problem solving.
Yes.
And so I, had operational team that ran really a meter shop. And so they were in a warehouse and they were, doing the things. And I was back at home base, working out of the office, and I would make a point to make sure that I would go there physically. Of course, Teams and Zoom allow you to meet virtually, but nothing can replace being there in person if you can. And so, because if you don't have that connection, then when you do need to support, you won't know how.
Right. Yes.
And that's so important that you know how to support people, and that requires a connection. It can absolutely be built virtually, 100%, but it's much easier to build a deeper connection if you're able to be in the same physical proximity. And so I make a point to be present and visit, because what's interesting, and this is a counterexample, if you are a leader and the folks that you are leading, if you show up and everyone freaks out, that's a problem. If everyone goes, oh, blah, 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 just is on the floor, and it travels, that's a problem.
Yes.
Because if you're supposed to be leading these folks, right, and they're supposedly following you, there should be a level of comfort there. And I experienced that where the leader of the organization, when the leader of the organization would come on the floor, it caused people to panic. And I said, I don't want that to ever be me. I don't want folks to go, oh, Philip's here, and have folks scurrying around trying to do stuff.
Yes.
And so I try to make it an important point to make sure that my presence is felt consistently, so that it isn't an abnormality when it happens.
Yes.
And that gets harder when you have geographically dispersed teams. It's still doable, but it's important so that when you do provide that support, it is in a way that they need it, which is so, it's a requirement in order for it to be meaningful for them, not you.
Yes.
Right? You're not providing support so that you feel like you're leading.
Right.
You're providing support because the people you are leading need it.
Yes.
and that push and pull with autonomy and support is so important.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I'm glad you brought up, when you show up, if they're scrambling or scurrying, then there's a problem there, because there was an instance where that exact thing was happening. They would say the big boss is on the floor, and this team would actually send text around. Such and such is coming, right? They'll be here in 15 minutes, right? And so everybody would start to scurry. And so that's something that team needed to figure out why, and that leader needed to figure out why that was the case. And I get it when, depending on the level of the boss that's showing up, there may be some scurrying. So, if the CEO is showing up and you don't typically see the CEO and you don't work with the CEO, then there may be some scurrying. I get that. But if your boss and maybe the next level boss is showing up and there's scurrying going on, then there's a problem there that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
But that reminded me of this team that would text, and the boss felt like they were giving that team autonomy, but that meant hands off. And so that was the scurry, is that because they were so hands off, when they showed up, it meant there was a problem. Because that was the only time they showed up. And so, my coaching to that leader was, you got to show up and be present when there's not a problem. You got to find that connection with the team so they're not scurrying when you show up. And then you can provide autonomy. And then there was a conversation that said, well, if I got to get in there and problem solve with them as part of the support, then they don't have any autonomy. And I said, ooh, that's an interesting perspective, because we all know that there are times when the leader needs to roll up their sleeves and actually get in there with the team. But in those moments, there's still autonomy there. The question that I had that leader think through was, when you rolled up your sleeve to join that problem-solving meeting, did you take it over? Were you now the single voice in the room and say, this is the way it should go? Or did you really become part of the team in the problem-solving process, still allowing them autonomy? So just because you're rolling up your sleeves as a leader, just because you are helping with the problem solving, doesn't mean you're not giving autonomy. You can still give the team autonomy to solve the problem in their way and help and support in the meeting, rolling up your sleeves. But as soon as you feel the need to take over, to steer it in the direction you think it ought to go, without allowing the team the time to experiment and grow, then you're not providing the support or the space for autonomy that you think you're giving. And you don't have to stay away. Autonomy doesn't mean staying away. You can't actually roll your sleeves up and get involved and still have autonomy. So
I agree with that 100%. And the metaphor that I use is, which hat do I have on?
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And so I often ask to say, okay, what hat would you like for me to have on?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like for me to have my VP hat on? Would you like for me to have fellow architect, fellow developer?
Yes.
What hat would you like for me to wear?
Yeah.
So that they can tell me how they would like for me to show up.
Yes.
And that helps me show up that way.
Mm-hmm.
And because I can still code, I'm still pretty good. I can still architect. I'm still one of the best.
Yes.
And I can still lead. Yes. And so, but you can't do all three of those simultaneously. Or I haven't found a way to do that. If I need to be leader because they pull the end on cord, that is how I'm going to show up. And then here's what is it? How can I help guide and provide that leadership? And what you need is a fellow architect. Absolutely. And then we can have a debate about the pros and cons of this component and its responsibilities versus this.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, the decision still belongs to them. And we can have a debate. And what has been interesting is there's been a time where I've had to straddle both of those worlds. And so I had an architect who said, hey, I would love to get your perspective. And I said, okay, great. What hat would you like for me to wear? And he said, fellow architect. Great. And we had a very healthy debate about it. And my position as an architect is that is not going to work.
Yeah.
What you were put forward is that is not going to work. And he felt confident that it would. Now, as his leader, I left the autonomy with him.
Yes.
And then I said, okay. And so I was like, now that you've made your decision, all right, as your leader, I will have to hold you to this decision because you know that you have two choices here. The choice you're making and the choice that your fellow architect said was not going to work.
Right.
Should this go into production and it fall over, I will have to hold you accountable for that.
Right. 100%.
And so it went in. We had 3 major incidents. 3 major incidents. Now, I knew as an architect it was not going to work.
Yes.
But I had to leave the autonomy with him to make the call, which he made, and then as his leader, hold him accountable to it.
That's good.
And so his rating took a hit that year because he put in something that caused 3 major incidents.
Yes.
And so that line is really important to walk in terms of autonomy has to be left with the decision maker. And yes, you have to let them have room to make mistakes.
Yes.
That doesn't mean those mistakes are consequence free.
Yeah, right.
But they're theirs to make.
Yes.
They are absolutely theirs to make.
Yes.
And it took, a release and a half to fix it because architecture mistakes aren't coding mistakes.
Yes.
It takes a little bit longer to fix an architecture design mistake than fix a coding one.
Yes.
And so, but he learned such a valuable lesson. The learning that he got and his peers got because they watched it go down.
Yes.
They watched me go, that's not going to work, but still allow him to do it.
Yes. Yes.
And that learning that they got, that he got and his peers got, was invaluable. Absolutely invaluable.
That's good. That's good. And there's a difference between experimentation and putting something in production. Right? So let's be clear. When somebody's experimenting and making mistakes, there's a space for that.
Yes.
In IT and technology, we call it a sandbox, maybe.
Yes.
Right? Where the mistake is less risky, doesn't impact the customer. You can learn without impacting production. But once you make the decision and take the risk, to put something into production is where I would coach that individual to say, next time you get the architect's advice that it won't work, you might want to experiment with that, with your decision to go with it, go forward with it anyway, first, before going into production.
Yes.
Right? Because, again, once you go into production, absolutely you're going to be held accountable, good or bad, for what goes in. So,
Yes.
That's a good story. That's excellent. And the switching of hats.
Yes.
Allowing you to switch hats, you knowing when to take a hat off and put another hat on, starts with connection and trust.
Yes.
Because you built that safe space. Because here's what I hear. It's the big boss that's saying, which hat do you want me to wear? And I really don't care what hat you put on. The hat that I see you in is my boss. I can't take the hat off of you. You might be able to take it off, but I can't. Until you build the environment that has connection and trust in it, that environment with connection and trust allows the team to say, okay, I know Phillip is my boss, but he just gave me the opportunity for him to help me as an architect or a coder, and I trust he will do that and leave the boss decisions and everything that goes into that out of this conversation. Because a lot of people don't trust that. But you built an environment in that story that allowed that person to say, I need you as an architect. And when you set your boss hat down, they trusted it was off. And then you had that critical conversation you were able to share with him as an architect, and he was able to share with you. And then you were able to put the hat back on and tell him, all right, now my hat's back on and I'm going to hold you accountable to this decision. That, and what the team saw and learned, not only was the autonomy piece, but the trust and connection piece. They trusted then, that when you said, I can take this hat off, that you really could.
Yeah, and the key to that is you can never take the authority.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't use your position to trump a conversation.
Yeah.
And you can do it unintentionally. You can but you got to be really, really deliberate about it. So like when you take that hat off, you really have to take it off.
Yes.
And the debates have to be based solely on the technical merits.
Yes.
Right? Because the moment you bring in position, then that trust is gone.
Yes.
And the conversation will stop.
Yes. And you can't split the hat.
Nope.
Right? It's got to come off,
Yep.
all the way off. And you got to have that conversation with the other hat fully on. Because if you split the hat, then you don't get trust because they don't know which side of the hat they're looking at
Exactly.
at any given moment. Right?
Yes.
That's good.
And you have to pull the conversations apart too. So when I put my hat back on, that was completely separate conversation.
Yeah.
So the conversation we were having as architects was a communal conversation. The conversation about accountability was a one-on-one.
Yes.
To say, okay, now that you've made this decision, so that way I wasn't in front of his peers
Yes.
showing my authority.
Yes.
Because then you lose the trust.
Yes.
It's like one-on-one, I said, here's the consequences that will happen
Yes.
should this unfold.
Yes.
Now, it was really hard for me. You can imagine how hard it was for me to let that go into production.
Yes. Yes.
But I had to let it go.
Yes.
Because you know, as my as my grandma would say, you know, some people don't believe, you know, that fat meat ain't crazy, and so, you know, and he learned, you know, that fat meat is in fact crazy. And the leader side is you do have to hold that accountability as well, which is a different conversation. But as we wrap up this great conversation, and again, we talked about another one of the 10 tensions of leadership by Justin Wright, and we talked about autonomy and support. Which is give your team room to solve problems their way and step in when they need you. Trust grows both ways. Such a great topic, and we will see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in to Leadership Unfiltered. We hope you have found value in our conversation and are ready to take action in your leadership journey. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And don't forget to connect with us on social media for more leadership insights and resources. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.